All right. Good evening. Hi, Galen. It's John Gluckman. It's Wednesday night, January the 17th. Tonight we have an interesting discussion that we're going to have between Dr. Ron Boersma Sr. and Dr. Ken Pepperdine. I might interject a question or two, but I'll kind of let them get into it. And Dr. Ron wants to talk about the 8 principles of naturally being healthy. I don't know the exact title, but I'll let him come on and get started. So go ahead, Dr. Ron.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. Some of you may be new to who I am, and been in the natural health field for about 30 years now, and really enjoyed it. But it came about really because of some situations in my own personal background with poor health. Born in 1943, had a lot of struggles early on in life with ear infections, tonsils being ripped out when I was 5, and I can still remember the doctor coming with the hand with the ether, and while I was gone, the next thing I was eating ice cream and Jello and feeling a whole lot better than I did. So I was dealing with some genetic weaknesses, which I want to talk a little bit about. My mother lost 2 babies at full term, one in 1936, one in 1938, and then I came along in 1943. So I've got some genetic weaknesses that I've had to deal with. I had a lot of penicillin over the years and followed the allopathic way. That's what my parents were doing. That's what I did. And got sicker and sicker. And ultimately, I got married to a wonderful lady by the name of Donna. I'm going to be celebrating 55 years in April. But she had a sister who was diagnosed with multiple myeloma back in early 80s. And she sought out a nutritional doctor in Chicago, went on a macrobiotic diet, and really changed her life. She did not do the chemotherapy. She did not do the traditional allopathic medicine. And that got me kind of interested because I'm figuring if she's dealing with cancer and she's doing quite well by what she's eating, maybe I could feel better by changing my diet. Donna was kind of reading books by Adele Davis and a few others and saying, Ron, you really ought to look at this. And Ron, you really shouldn't eat this and you shouldn't eat that. And, kind of going over my head a little bit. But then I heard a doctor talk that really got my attention and everything changed. One of the things that I know for a fact is that our food has changed. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. My slogan has been in my practice, building health, not treating disease. So what do I mean by that? When we look back at allopathic medicine in this country, and that really started out probably early 1900s when we started getting chemical drugs. Prior to that, pretty much everything was organic. So we didn't have a big need for all these things. But then we had the petrochemical industry, and if most people don't know, most drugs are synthesized using coal tar as a base. Think about that. So your cough syrup that you take is really a suppressant, not an expirant. And we want to get rid of things. We don't want to suppress things and keep it within us. So I started looking at, well, why am I sick? What's causing me to be sick? Other people my age aren't, but I am. So then I go back to, well, what am I putting in my body? So the 8 stepping stones or the 8 origins of health are nutrition, digestion, assimilation, elimination, utilization, attitude, exercise, and environment. So let's break them down a little bit, especially the first 4. Nutrition. What's nutrition? Well, it's anything that we put into the body that matches our chemical composition of the body, our ability to use it as fuel. So I when I was in practice, I'm now retired, and I would have mothers coming in and they're talking about their kids and they're not eating well, and I would ask them a question like, what makes your car run? And the kid would say, well, gasoline. I said, well, why don't you just put water in that tank? It's a liquid. And they would say, well, that's really dumb. We need fuel, whether it's diesel or gas or whatever. I said, that's correct. So what are we putting in our bodies that will fuel us? Are we putting in the right fuel? Well, the right fuel is something that the body recognizes. Those are called nutrients, proteins, starches, amino acids, all kinds of things that allow the body. But where do we get those? Not from a pill. We get those from foods that are organically grown that the body recognizes as food. So if we're getting those, and we had that when I was a kid, just about everything was organic. The grocery store that I went to about 2 blocks from my house was probably 30 feet wide, 100 feet long. Plenty of food. We thrived. The supermarket I go to now covers acres. Now, my question is, did God create that many new foods for us? Very simple answer, absolutely not. So what are in those things? And if you haven't, and you probably all have because you're all smart people, because you're here in Igalen, you want to help people. You want to help people become healthy. And we have great products now, too, that are going to do a great deal of benefit to the body. But we still need to really talk about what are we putting in our body. Now, we can take drugs, and drugs are going to be maybe masking a symptom. Maybe if we got a headache, the aspirin will take the headache away. But my question is, why did we have the headache? Is it a toxic reaction to something we've eaten? Is it a hormonal imbalance? Did we bump our head? If we bumped our head, well, maybe then an aspirin might be okay on an occasion. But most people are so bombarded. When I grew up in the age when television was just coming in. And I can remember having this stinky little TV and watching cartoons on a Saturday morning. And it was a round tube, probably much, much bigger than my head. And we had all the neighbor kids all together. But what they were doing already is advertising. What are they advertising? Foods, processed foods, and now drugs. And in America, the United States, I can't go out and buy a drug. So why are they advertising drugs to me? I can't go use them. I have to go see my doctor. Oh, what a plan. Now, why do I need to go get those drugs? Because I'm eating the foods that they're telling me to eat on the television or the soda pop or whatever is out there. Just watch television, don't watch the program, watch the commercials for a few days and see if you really realize what they're promoting to us. And most people, if you hear that long enough, you believe it to be true. So nutrition, we got to get back to what is designed for our bodies. That's nutrients. Then we need to take those nutrients, we need to be able to digest them. So as I'm talking, I'm producing some saliva in my mouth. Now that's bad if you're real close to me because you might get a faceful. But it's very important eating. And it's very important to eat slowly. I'm talking to me now because I'm one that usually likes to inhale food. But we need to slow down and chew because enzymes in our mouth, in the saliva, are starting to break down those foods so we can digest them. Because you can put gas in the tank of the car, but unless it gets from the back end of the car to the engine, meets a spark and some oxygen, nothing's going to happen. You can have a beautiful Lamborghini, but it's just going to sit there. And it's the same thing with us. We need to be able to digest it. We need to break it down. That happens with saliva. It happens with stomach acids. It happens with bile. It happens, all kinds of systems within our body are really, and I'm not going to get into the depth of that now, but it really helps to break down the food so that it gets to the small intestine where we have about, well, let's see, if you spread out the intestinal tract, the small intestine, lay it out, it's about the size of a tennis court. Think about that. In that small intestine, which is about as big around as a garden hose, we've got millions and millions of little villi that are 64ths of an inch long. They're covered with a single layer of cells called the epithelia. Now, if we're eating a piece of chicken, that piece of chicken can't get through that cell and get into the bloodstream. So we have to digest it. We have to break down that protein to amino acids, to single amino acids, so it's small enough transport into the cell to get into the bloodstream in order for our bodies to function right. And that's assimilation. So we got to assimilate the nutrients that are properly broken down. And then what's not broken down, or the waste of what, when it's burnt up and utilized like fuel, like you put a log on the fire, pretty soon you've got ashes. Well, we've got ashes too, and those ashes need to come out. That's elimination. And a lot of people are not eliminating properly. And they're not eliminating properly because it goes back to the the nutrition. They're putting in the wrong foods that cannot break down. They become a plug. If you've ever had a stopped up drain and you get sewer gas, you got some problems. And a lot of people are dealing with those problems in their bodies. So we need to change that. And we can change that by starting at the beginning with proper nutrition, good digestion, good assimilation occurs, good elimination will happen. And the people that are not eliminating are storing these toxins and they're recirculating in the body. And when they're recirculating, they're getting into tissues, and that's causing a toxic effect in the body. And then we have symptoms from that. What happens then? Well, if we listen to the television, we run to the doctor and say, I've got this symptom. And he runs to the PDR and physician's desk reference. Well, here's the symptom, here's the drug, because that's what the drug guys told him. Is that the right answer? I don't believe it is. Now, I'm not saying that there's never a case for a drug. We have the finest in North America, and maybe in Australia as well, and around the world. We have the finest doctors when it comes to trauma. But when it comes to knowing what to feed you to get you healthy, they have no clue because they have not studied it. They study drug therapies, they study surgery, they study all those things that treat the symptom or the condition, the dis-ease. Dis-ease is simply systems not working right, and then they name it because that system failed. So we got a doctor for arthritis, we got a doctor for skin, we got a doctor for this, we got a doctor for that, we got a intestinal doctor, we have a hangnail specialist. We've got everything, and nobody's looking at the whole person, sitting down, taking the time to address what's the underlying reason that you're experiencing the symptoms that you have, which is causing dis-ease. And if it comes big enough, then they label it and then they treat it with their drugs or their surgery or whatever. So we really don't want to do that. So then those are the four main ones. Then how do we utilize that? How does it happen in the body? What's our attitude? Oh, attitude's a huge, huge deal. We need to exercise. You got to move. And the reason we got to move, we've got blood. I'm sitting here right now, and if I sit perfectly still, my heart's pumping, and it's pumping blood all throughout my body. But we have a lymph system as well. And the lymph system does not work sitting. The only way it works is movement. It's like a little flapper. If you're moving, like walking, swimming, rebounding, really, really good things to do to pump the lymph system. What's the lymph system? It's your immune system. We got lymph nodes that are a problem. They're congested because of the poor nutrition, poor digestion, poor assimilation, poor elimination. We got plugged up systems. So we got to move the system. So really, really critical. So those are the stepping stones. And if we miss some of those stepping stones, those 8 stepping stones, we're going to wind up with sub-health conditions. Which brings me to, and I'll just briefly say this, there's sub-health conditions, and those are the health destroyers. These are health builders that I just talked about, but there are health destroyers, and there are 6 of them that cause sub-health condition. Number 1, hereditary weakness. I have some of that, but it can be overcome. There's congenital deformity, and there's organic injury. Now, that accounts for about 5% of the problems. But the majority of it, the 95% of sub-health conditions are cellular contamination, nutritional weakness, and emotional stress. So we got to look at the health builders and the health destroyers. And I think just knowing that is going to help people live a more productive life. Now, we have 2 great products that are some of the most amazing products I've ever seen in 30 years in this industry. And I've worked with a lot of companies with a lot of products. But this addresses the foundation, but it is not still an excuse for a poor diet. Because if you're just using Emulin to reduce the inflammation that we all deal with, but not look at what's causing that inflammation, we're playing games, and eventually you're going to get caught. That's my opinion, and we need to really go to that, and that's kind of what the 8 origins of health and then the health destroyers are all about. So, any questions, Ken, John?
It's interesting because I hear you saying things that I say in a different way, and I'll speak about it a little bit more when I take a turn here. But there's so much overlap. I love what you said about food has changed since the 1930s. There's some great stuff on YouTube by the Sally Fallon, who is the head of the Weston Price Institute, their lobby group. Weston Price was a dentist who traveled the world in the 1930s, taking pictures of indigenous people who had not been exposed to Western food. I've got his book. I can just stand up and show you the title. That book was published 50, 60 years ago or more, 80 years. Anyway, and that still holds true. These people were eating the foods that their environment provided, and they were healthy. They didn't have chronic degenerative disease. They lived to an old age. Their biggest worries were things like hygiene and infection from injuries and things like that. She talks about a cookbook from the 1850s, I think, and reads recipes where it says 2 pounds of butter and half a pound of lard and all of these things that we're not supposed to eat, but those people were healthy.
Yes.
And so in a sense, we need to go full circle. Also, what you were saying about allopathic in the 1900s struck a note with me. The chiropractic, osteopathic, naturopathic all stemmed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was because of a move away from medicine. Medicine at that time was using tinctures of mercury, arsenic, not washing their hands, leeches, unsanitary conditions, and people were dying of the treatment. And a search began about there must be a better way, and that's where our respective professions began, including homeopathy as well. And so it was a movement away from medicine. So at this point and in this conversation, it's like we've come full circle. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Ron.
It's interesting. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Ron, that was a terrific summary. And, it made me think when I look at my face and how overweight I am and all the different conditions I've had over the years. And even though I know this stuff on a daily basis, without having a partner and without really being conscientious on an ongoing basis, I try not to shop in the middle columns of a Safeway or a Save On Foods. I try and stay on the outside lanes. And yet, despite all that, here it is. These disease processes, these sub-health conditions have affected me to the point where, I've had more than my share of issues. And I understand, the real clean way that you explained the whole issue is very, very good. So keep on going. Just keep talking to Ken on this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, and I just want to remind everyone too, and I think all of you probably have seen it in some of the Facebook groups, that the brain, broken brain video, you want to go, it's GMOs Revealed is the corporate overlay of that thing. But if you go to GMOs Revealed, you'll find it. Last night I watched that for 58 minutes. It was awesome. In fact, I looked at Donna and I said, those doctors, they're talking functional medicine. It's basically what we're talking.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's what I've been teaching for the last 30 years. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't listen to that because they're not hearing that from their local medical doctor. And somehow, when we're approaching people with our supplements, we cannot use this supplement no matter what company we're involved with. And we're all dealing with Igala. We're dealing with great products, but these are not cure-alls. These are products that allow our bodies to function better. But if we keep putting garbage in, we're going to continue to have the problem. Now, that doesn't mean when we get rid of the problems, we can just quit the supplementation, because I don't want to live a sub-health condition. I want to be running on all 8 cylinders. until the last breath I take at 100 or more. And
I love it, Ron. I love it what Ernest Hemingway said. I've been saying to patients, somebody asked him how he went broke, and I heard his answer, and I thought, that's how I want to die. He said, I went broke very, very slowly at first, and then all of a sudden at the end. And that would be a good way to die.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a long time ago, back in the late 80s, I studied with Dr. Bernard Jensen out in Southern California at his ranch. Spent 10 days, probably the most exciting 10 days, learning about food and what food does for the human body. And he literally went out to the orchard, he went to the field, and we had this, what he called the Hippocrates Circle. We all sat around on stones, and he lectured us about what this food does and what it contains and the nutrients that it contains, the phosphorus and all these things that allow our bodies to function properly are in our foods. And he said to the women, ladies, feed your family the good foods. Spend your money on your groceries. You know, you can go and spend your money on all kinds of garbage, but spend your money on your food, because that's what's going to take you to that wonderful end of being broke just at the end.
And if you don't spend it on your food now, you'll be spending it on your medicine later.
Amen.
And of course, Hippocrates at the beginning of the medicine that we know today said, let your medicine be your food and your food be your medicine.
Indeed. If we've got time, I got one other little thing I call because everybody always asks Donna and I when they meet us, well, what do you guys eat? You know, because they're so confused because they just go to the grocery store, nobody reads labels. So when you go to the grocery store next time, you're probably all avoiding those back and forth aisles and just shopping the perimeter like John was talking about. But go down those aisles and pick up something and read the label. Most of those things on the label you cannot even pronounce. If you can't pronounce them, they're not good for your body. And I'm old enough to remember when margarine was bought in because there's high cholesterol, and they had to put a little color additive to make it look like butter. We've been hoodwinked so long, folks, it's not even funny. So here are the health protectors that I call what we should be eating in this ratio. So the health protectors, in 3 parts of these, so you take your whole food for the day, and out of that you're going to have fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh salads, beans and peas, whole grains, true nuts, dry fruits, and vegetable juices. Now, that's more of the alkaline foods, and we talked about alkaline and acid, and we had that conversation with Dr. Rajan. He was going to be talking to Dr. Stefano about the alkalinity of the Climax, and I believe probably is very, very alkaline because of the color of it. So we want 3 servings a day out of that group. And then yogurt is neutral. So eat all you want, and yogurt's really beneficial. I eat raw goat milk yogurt every night. And right after this call, I'm going to have a nice dish of it. It's got all the friendly bacteria to keep that gut health balanced, because we went out to eat today. We had a gift certificate. We went to a restaurant, and I know that restaurant food is not as clean as what I'm eating at home. So I want good gut health, so I'm going to put some bio energy in my body, some healthy bacteria to make sure that I counteract all the negative stuff that I put in my body today, which normally I don't do. So, and then here are the things that we should eat 1 serving of, or proportionally: fish, fowl, beef, lamb, eggs, butter, cheese, raw goat's milk, raw cow's milk. Why do I say raw? In the U.S., you can't, most places, you can't buy raw milk because it's against the law. You have to pasteurize it and homogenize it, which means kill it so it doesn't have any enzymes. And the people that are dealing with the constipation issues are the people who eat a lot of dairy products, cheeses, pasteurized milk, and wheat. Ever work with paper mache? Works out real nice, and all of a sudden you got a hard thing there. And then you got constipation. And then you have all those toxins recirculating in the body, and then you have hormonal imbalances. It's really something, folks. But we have to train people to stop and think. They don't. They see it, they eat it. That's wrong. We need to educate people, and we're educating people about Emulin, and we're going to be talking more and more as we get our product. I hope I get mine yet this week. But the Climax, we need to talk about those things for what they do, but we cannot neglect telling people about what a good diet should be to have optimum health. Otherwise, we're playing games with people, and we're just doing this for monetary benefit. I'm doing this to build health, and when I find a product, and I don't care what company it is, and it's about it because I want to be people helping people, which is our slogan that we have now. So those are things. And then there's the health destroyers. This is really an interesting list. Homogenized milk, pasteurized milk, margarine, hydrogenated peanut butter, processed and American-style cheeses, polyunsaturated oils, fast foods, prepared foods, skin, box, frozen, all that stuff that has additives to keep it preserved. So when we die, we're probably going to look really good if you're eating those things. It's going to be well preserved. So, and then we've got white bread, all these things where the goodness that is in the grains naturally is all ripped off and thrown away. And then we've got pastries and cakes and pies and jellies and jams and sweeteners and soft drinks. Soft drinks. Osteoporosis is a big, big deal today. And soft drinks contain phosphoric acid. And in nature, foods have phosphorus and calcium combined. When you drink a soft drink, you're getting phosphoric acid. And it says, okay, how do I balance that out with the calcium? There's none here. So go to the bones, go to the teeth, the nails, grab the calcium you need to make it work. So we have osteoporotic thin bones. And we're walking and we break a hip and fall. Did you hear what I just said? We walk and break a hip and fall. We don't fall and break a hip.
Right.
This is serious.
Dr. Ron, I want to just tag on to that one thought in a big way. Years ago, I was very actively marketing alkaline water machines from a company in Japan. And a lot of the teaching that I did back then was the corrosive effect of bottled water on the same issue on osteoporosis. So here you are, you're a young athlete, or you're a dancer, you're a yoga instructor or whatever, or you're riding your bike everywhere. You're always carrying a bottle of water from Dasani or Aquavelva or whatever they're calling it. And that water, literally, if you knew where that water came from, it came from the city supply, put through an osmotic filter, which took away all the minerals, and then was put into a bottle that was sitting there with phthalates, this chemical that's leaching into the water. You're drinking a lot of that. The water has no calcium, and your body is looking for calcium and other minerals in the water. And when it doesn't get it, it does exactly what you said. It goes to the bone and starts leaching it out. So we are now seeing a level of osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis, in young women in their 20s and 30s, which we never saw before, on a level that is unexpected. And it's the next major pandemic. Just like, we have the dementia and Alzheimer at the really older age, but we're getting the osteoporosis 20 to 30 years before we ever saw it before. And it's all due to drinking this denuded, worthless water.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in, where I live, Holland, Michigan. We were the second city in the nation, followed 1 year behind Grand Rapids, Michigan, to put fluoride in our drinking water. Mm. Now, if you looked at a can of fluoride at a chemistry company, there's skull and crossbones on there.
Yeah. We
have a high incidence of cancer in West Michigan because of that. Yeah. And it's just accumulative.
Yeah. And anyway, Ken, do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I've got all kinds. I could take off and talk for a bit if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Please do.
All right. So lots of thoughts come to mind. I better introduce myself first. I've been Ken Pepperdine, been a chiropractor for 40 plus years. I'm into my 41st year now. Made the mistake of calculating the other day how many patient visits I've had, and it's about 250,000. And I've done about 1 million chiropractic adjustments. Now, I'm not bragging. I shouldn't even look at it. It makes me feel tired. But if I have something, it's basically I have seen 250,000 people with health complaints, and ranging everything, cancer, you name it. So I've seen a lot. I have 700 hours in applied nutritional education and 300 more in other structured nutritional education, and easily, just like Ron, probably 2 to 3 times that in constant upgrades and reading. And having said that, I am not a nutritional expert. There are a lot of people that know more than I do, and they can pin it down to the molecular level, and bless them. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them are also selling a product, so they take their nutritional expertise to sell that product, and they tend to be a little bit blinded towards nutrition in general. The analogy I would use for Ron and myself and other health practitioners, I don't know if anyone recalls that story about 3 blind men feeling an elephant. It's an old parable, and one blind man was feeling the leg and said, well, an elephant feels like a tree. And the other was feeling the ear and said, no, 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 an elephant feels like a leaf. And the other one was feeling the trunk and said, no, no, an elephant feels like a snake. And in nutrition, we're a lot that way. We tend to have our niche, and we tend to see things through our particular point of view. And all of us have to open our minds to other points of views, and those people listening as well. There's a lot of different points of view, and I beg you to be open, but a little bit critical. What else was I going to say? One of the reasons that you see a lot of chiropractors involved in nutrition, is that we have a lot more nutrition than physicians. I've got the hours somewhere, but it is 6 times. But the founder of our profession talked about something called innate intelligence. And the most simple quote I can find about innate intelligence is, he said, we are not separate from natural laws. Natural laws apply to us. We are no different than the animals. Yet if you look around you, we're treating ourselves as if we are impervious to things that break all the natural laws. And that's where a lot of disease comes from. So I'm kind of circling around a lot of what Ron said. So a lot of chiropractors are steeped in that, and they're open to things that obey natural laws. And of all of them, I think Emulin it's the poster child for that. When I talk about ideas, I talk about principles of health, not specifics. And if somebody was to ask me to diagnose them and offer treatment on a Zoom call, that would be malpractice. I'm reminded of there's a psychologist or psychiatrist in the US that rendered mental health judgment on the president based on what she'd seen on the media. That's malpractice. Turns out she didn't have a license in the first place, so that's okay. I'm not sticking up for the president, but I'm just saying health is complex, and there are questions to be asked and answered. And Ron, I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you? That I'm not going to ask somebody on a call, how do you poop, how often, and things like that. So it is complicated. And from my point of view, what do we need? We need exercise. And just like Ron said, it's got to circulate the blood and the lymph. Your liver is a large filter. It does 500 metabolic functions. And unless you get the blood traveling through there, your metabolism grinds to a halt. Also, your muscles are the motor. So muscles burn energy. Now, when you exercise, and I'm sure some of you have been on a treadmill and been very disappointed. Say, geez, I just went for 20 minutes and I only burned 30 calories. This is terrible. But the fact is that when you have muscle, it burns energy at rest. So when there's an amount of muscle, you're burning more calories even when you're not working. And so it's kind of like, it's probably a bad analogy, but comparing a semi-truck with a Prius. And in this case, you want to burn fuel because most of us put too much of it in. So exercise. We need the right food, as Ron said, and I agree very strongly with him about the right oils. You want an omega-3 to 6 fatty acid ratio of 1 to 1 or 1 to 2. Otherwise, it's going to trigger inflammation. And if you go down those middle aisles, look at salad dressings, you'll see olive oil salad dressings. And when you turn it around, it's going to be canola oil, palm oil, 3 or 4 other oils, and a titch of olive oil. So they will lie to you to sell their products. So good oils, the wrong oils are highly inflammatory. And that's why there's such an epidemic of heart disease, stroke, all of those problems in the southern states, because they're very big on deep fried food, and it's plugging them up and it's killing them. So, but the edible oil market loves it, right? Edible oils are wonderful. So you need exercise, you need the right foods, as Ron described. I cannot overestimate the effect of stress. Stress is huge, and we don't understand it. Now, I happen to have done a research residency into stress and stress reduction. We don't realize that when we're in traffic and the car in front of us, we're inhaling the fumes, that's a stressor. We don't realize that when we stay up late at a party, even though we have fun, that's a stressor. Stressors are cumulative through our life, and your body can get into this fight or flight response and gradually exhaust itself. And in the exhaustion phase of the fight or flight response, that's when the chronic degenerative disease comes up. Hans Selye was a scientist at McGill University in Canada, nominated for 9 Nobel Prizes, discovered what stress was. He sacrificed thousands of rats to do it. And I always talk to people about it to honor those rats that gave up their lives. So it doesn't matter whether you're burned, yelled at, poisoned, eat the wrong stuff, breathe the wrong stuff, put bad stuff on your skin. The stress result is the same. Your body has a similar stress reaction to all of those things, and it's cumulative, and it wears us out. And so we have to look at stress as a big cause of it. I like to talk about mental hygiene. A lot of us have poor mental hygiene. We worry about stuff. Anxiety lives in the future. Guilt lives in the past. You live in the present. The more you jump from the past to the future and suffer anxiety and guilt, the more you're placing yourself under unnecessary stress. And it's just simply developing some mental hygiene and remembering that if you're disappointed with somebody or something that happened, the first question I always ask is, well, who appointed you? You appointed you. So if you're disappointed, it was because you had expectations that weren't met, and you're having a stress response to it.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So headspace is very good, and a clean environment. Ron, you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Wholeheartedly.
And fat, I'll just talk a little bit about fat. Fat is your toxic waste dump. Why they tell you not to eat swordfish and things like that, they're at the top of the food chain. Well, of course, until they get to us. We're at the tippity top of the food chain. Is that those animals store toxins in their fat. So do we. We're at the peak of the food chain, and we're putting all that toxins in our fat. And then we go to lose fat. How are we going to get rid of the toxins? We put them there because we couldn't deal with them in the first place. So what's going to happen? So we have to take care of our toxicities, and there are protocols for doing that, and get the toxins out of your body. And for those of us, I personally feel that's one of the reasons that I had a great response to Amulin, is that I've been working on that for years, and not particularly toxic until I come into tequila. Now, how much time have we got, John? Should I go on? Or?
Just keep going.
Okay. And if anybody's getting bored or something, put up your hand or do something, because for Ron and I, it's the first time out, and we don't know whether we're hitting the nail on the head or not for you folks. A question that I always get asked, and Ron touched on it in his way, is why am I sick? Why did this happen? Why? And your medical doctor can go into that and say, well, you know, you have very high cholesterol levels, or you have high C-reactive protein, or you have this, or you have that. Your arthritic markers are high. Why? And I had difficulty answering that question for the first couple of years in practice. And finally, I sat down and really thought about it. And just like Ron said, there's only 5 variables. You only have 5 things that you can work on to prevent and to heal yourself. 2 of them are very, I won't call them rigid, but they're difficult. So there's your genetics and there's your prior injuries. Ron alluded to that. There's a new field called epigenetics, and it's showing us that your environment triggers your genetic expression to a high degree. When you're in the right environment, you trigger good genetic expression. When you're in a toxic environment, you trigger the bad things. And so now they're talking less about your genetics and more about your genomics and what your genome is and living appropriately for how you're made. And that's all this genetic testing you see on TV. So why am I sick? Genetics, prior injuries, everything that's happened to you up until this point in your life. The time you fell out of the pickup truck at the drive-in, the crappy bed that you had when you were a little kid, jumping out of the barn and you weren't supposed to, and you hurt your knee and that leg stopped growing while the other one kept going, things like that. So genetics, prior injuries, those are kind of historical. They're somewhat inflexible. The 3 that you can work with the best are your chemistry. That's what you eat, the medications you take, the stuff that you put on your skin, the stuff you inhale. You can work with that. And you clean your chemistry constantly. Your activities. If you sit all day long, you're going to have trouble. That's great for our business. Exercise fits into there. So the good activities, the bad activities, and then leaning towards the good activities is going to manifest in big health changes. And these things are free. They're just free. They're out there. You can do them. And make a huge health benefit. So just to recap, we've got our genetics, we've got our prior injuries, we've got our, what did I say that the next one was? Activities, day-to-day activities, your chemistry, and then we have your state of stress. So your stress environment dictates how you're responding. And that's all there is to work with unless you believe in black magic or karma or something else. And it's simple. Work with those things. And that's all you need to do. In terms of diet, I really agree with what Ron said. There was a diet in the 1980s that was absolutely horrible. It was called the Target diet. And it was high carb, low fat. It was back then. But the principle I found, I like it. And I'm talking to people about it. Think of a target. You got the bullseye. And you got the rings going out to the outside. The good food is at the bullseye. And when you make a food choice, and it's not hard to figure out what the good and so I think those are just simple things that we can adopt. The more you act on them, the more you'll be empowered. And the first step is the hardest. And as you begin to make those little choices, you see the benefits and they begin to compound. Ron, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you just triggered a perfect segue maybe to close us off tonight. Is what we're saying is that what we have with Emulant and Climax is going to allow people to feel better.
Yes.
And when they feel better, they're going to make better choices.
Yes.
And I think what we're trying to do is lay out what are those better choices. And I think all of us need to be an active participant in that. If we're just out selling the product, we're doing people a disservice. We need to open their eyes, pull back the veil to see it's really quite simple.
Yes.
I think so many people think, oh, it is so complex. You know, you're eating this and you're eating that. And yeah, when it's like my friend used to say, it's pop it and flop it. You pop it out of the freezer and you pop it in the microwave and you eat it. That's not the way to live. He's no longer living. But, you know, we need to break it down to real simple. What's good food? What's bad food? And then how do we supplement because of the environmental impact that we're getting today? with glyphosate, for instance, which is in all of our corn and all the processed food that we're going to get from time to time. So we gotta really address that. We gotta make it simple.
Yeah, I agree with you. Go ahead, John.
So guys, we're about getting close to an hour. What I'd like to propose is that for the viewers, for our guests tonight, if you've enjoyed this kind of interaction back and forth with the doctors and the topic that they chose as the first interaction, what would be nice is if you shared some other issues that you wanted to see discussed in more detail. Because obviously, you can see these are two very intelligent and very well experienced gentlemen who have a real passion for teaching in particular, and obviously they know their stuff. And so let's get some of that feedback here. Now Ken and Ron, would you be okay to put out your email so you'd receive some of this feedback directly, or
Yes.
do you channel through me?
I cannot promise to reply instantly or anything like that, but we can consider those and include them in the next one.
Well, and it doesn't have to be immediately the next one. It'll be different topics because you're going to go and do this for weeks in advance. You might as well have some input from the folks and what they want to hear and what they are struggling with, what they'd like to be taught more about.
They're going to send us back to school.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No,
we're the biggest benefits, aren't we, Ken?
We're going to do a little bit of Q&A in a minute, but just on the chat line, if each of you guys would put your email on there, because everybody knows mine, but Ken and Ron, put your emails in the chat line, and then people can actually grab that information and then feed back to what they felt about today and then what they want to hear going forward. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. So Q&A time. Let's see what people are interested in talking about. So
I have one thing I'd like to say because Ron, especially when he was talking about food and the quality of food and everything that's centered around that. I was born and raised in a farm. We had 100 acres, but we had 60 dairy, milk cows, and et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that I read about 2 years ago was University of Illinois in Chicago have a division in the university that has been testing products for almost 75 years in the U.S. For nutrition coming out of different products. Mm-hmm. They did a sample on oranges in Florida because of all the outside influences on them. Mm-hmm. That an orange that you ate and got a certain amount of protein and all the good coming out of the oranges 10 years or 20 years ago, to get the same amount now, you need 9 oranges.
Right.
With, I forget the leafy vegetable that it is, but there was 35 years ago, 1 8-ounce cup, to get the same amount of good out of it now. It's spinach, by the way.
Yep.
And you have to eat 38 cups to get the same amount of protein out of that, say, 1 cup 30-some years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, down here where I live on Prince Edward Island, we're an agricultural community, pretty well the whole island. But the big farms are taking over. Mm-hmm. McCain's and Cavendish, they own a lot of the island now. Okay. But the chemicals that are used, the fertilizers and the chemicals that are used in that, a lot of my brother worked, he didn't use chemicals in anything. Mm-hmm. Our cattle didn't take hormones or anything like that either. But he said, bring the land back to where the food that was being produced tasted like food again. Mm-hmm. Have to take it out of production for 20 years. Has to lay fallow to get all the good out of it. And like I know that 20 years ago, you take a carrot, geez, I'd eat raw potatoes out of the field when we were picking. You can't use it now. There's no taste to it. Back then there was taste. Same with carrots.
So,
But
Brian, obviously that information has been around for a while, and what I say to people is, if you're expecting some white knight to come and rescue you, you have to really understand who controls the food industry and the beverage industry.
Yeah.
These like the food industry, beverage industry, and the alcohol tobacco in the United States represent 17% of all manufacturing. They have the biggest lobby power, the biggest lawyers working on their behalf. Nothing is going to change dramatically to reverse this, condition of despoiled earth, of denuded earth.
Yeah.
All the pollution that's dropping on it, and all these amazing factory farms and the way they keep our chickens and pigs and cattle. That's not going to change. So what the doctors here have been suggesting is, look, it is up to you. And before I finish, let me just, so the 5 or the 10 most powerful words that I've ever heard strung together are each 2 letters long. And here it is. If it is to be, it is up to me. You can't delegate your health or the change to anybody else. You have to take it onto yourself, as these doctors are offering to help us. And so if it is to be, it is up to me. So don't wait for anybody to come and save you. You've got to do it yourself. Now, who else has a question? Let's go on to the next one.
I've got one little interjection here, John, about what you said. If you want to change the food industry, change it with your wallet.
Don't buy there. Yeah.
Buy the good food.
Yeah, exactly.
And there will be more, and it will get cheaper, and it will save the earth.
But Ken, the reality is that the middle class, the poor class, has had no growth in their income for almost 40 years. They've been beat down so much, and the television ads persistently drive this insane stuff at you, and the drugs, as Dr. Ron was saying, that even if you really intentionally want to do right, you just can't afford it in today's society.
We should talk about that at some point, Ron, and come up with some ideas for inexpensive food.
There you go.
Yeah.
We do our own sprouts here, and they taste so good, and they're so nutritious, and they're not expensive.
Okay. Now, so anybody else? We're getting awfully close to 6 o'clock. We want to keep this under an hour. So one last question, if you don't mind. Anybody?
Yes. John, hi, it's Ellie.
Hi, Ellie. Go ahead.
I was thinking this when you were talking about the water, and Sandy just posted it. So where do we find safe water other than a well or a natural spring?
You find it right on your tap, and you take your tap, you attach it to a machine called the Enagic alkaline water generator, and you get terrific water for the rest of your life. But it is $4,000. You can buy them used. You can find them used on Craigslist. I always find them around North America used, and I buy them for people for between $1,000 and $2,000. But it's the best water you'll ever drink, and you eliminate having to ever buy bottled water, and you'll solve many health conditions at the same time. If you want to know more, I'll be happy to guide you on alkaline water.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, and maybe a little less expensive way to go too. We've been using for several years now a Berkey water filter system.
Actually, we have that too.
Yep. I mean, you can go out in the pond out back somewhere or puddle water and pour it in there. You'll probably want to strain out the solids, but it'll give you good water. And we've got a fluoride attachment because we have fluoride. Boy, that water is, I mean, it just shines in the glass. Oh yeah, you got it. It's amazing water. Yeah.
Okay. There's another solution for you. Okay. Well, listen, you guys, it's been a great call, and I'm really glad to see both Ron and Ken kind of get more used to this. Over the next week or two, I'll show them the various controls in this, and I'll kind of take more of a backward step from this and let them run their own show. And just keep bringing your people over. We had a pretty good turnout today, but these guys obviously know an awful lot and they want to share it with you. So just bring your teams and your guests, and let's make this a regular, learning opportunity every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, and then whatever it is down under for Jackie. Okay, guys.
Hi guys, I'm just arriving because I programmed it into my phone wrong, but you're going to send me the recording, right?
Of course I will, Debbie.
I'm so sorry, you guys. I was going to be here. I was all excited.
You missed the best call ever.
I bet I did. I bet I did. Well, I'll see it soon, secondhand.
Tell me you're right. All right, you guys. Good night. I'm stopping.
Right. Night.
See you later, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ken.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.